when you talk about voting, right, what is the one thing that everybody thinks should happen with voting? Your vote counts, but one person, one vote. And that concept comes from a Supreme Court ruling in 1963. And Justice William O. Douglas says, the concept of political equality from the Declaration of Independence to Lincoln's Gettysburg Address can mean only one thing: one person, one vote. Okay? Ranked choice voting violates that concept of one person, one vote. So the first thing we have to say is, if we're violating ranked choice, violating one person, one vote, is it fair? And what we see is that no, it's really not fair, because first of all, it centralizes power, and we're going to go into that. It is unfair in multi-seat races, and this is really important because what they're doing here in the state of Utah is they are focused on the municipalities to get this in, because they figure, if they try to go to the top and they say, we're going to vote for governor by ranked choice voting, people are going to go, yeah, why would you change that? Wouldn't you want to do a pilot program? So they go to the municipalities and they can talk to your local city council and they can say, hey, this is so wonderful. And of course they tell you all the reasons why it's wonderful. And the problem is that city council, most places, they don't just have, one person that runs for one seat. So I come from Highland. We currently have 6 people running for 2 seats on our city council. Okay. And the way that we do that, because we didn't adopt ranked choice voting, thank you, you get to vote for up to 2. And in 2 years, there will be 3 seats open, and we'll vote for up to 3. And whoever the people are that get the top 2 or top 3 numbers of votes, they are the ones who are elected. It's very simple. This is not liking me. There we go. Oh, I didn't go through them all. The next one is that it redefines a majority, as we saw in the video. There is a fairly high level of minority disenfranchisement and ballot confusion. So that's a big problem. It limits the grassroots involvement for people, the average people that want to run for public office. It limits their ability to do that. And it neuters third-party candidates. And this is interesting because that's one of the selling points of ranked choice voting is, oh, it's going to help third parties. Yeah, it really doesn't. And it is promoted by global power brokers. And if any of you want to take a straw poll on who's involved in that, we'll get to that at the end and we'll see who wins. So this is an interesting slide. I got this from the legislature. This is their Office of Legislative Research. And between 2016 and 2020, there were 137 partisan primary elections. And one of the reasons that the legislature is looking at doing ranked choice voting is because they want people to win with a majority. I mean, it sounds great, right? I mean, our governor was elected in the primary with like 37% of the vote. And that sounds like a really bad thing, right? And so they really want people to have a majority. But it's really not that big of an issue because in the last 4 years, there were only 23 primary elections where the winners won with less than a majority. So here's the other interesting thing about this. On all of the literature, the way that it changes the outcome from that first place to the second place or whatever, it ranges between 3%, that's the number that we got from our Utah County Clerks Association, it's about 2-3%, which in this case means that we would have had less than one election outcome that may have been changed, or it could be as high as 18%, which still means it's about 4 in 4 years that would have changed the outcome. So we're working really hard to change this outcome for arguably 4 races in 4 years. So it makes me wonder if this is not a solution in search of a problem. So because I have a math degree and I spent 8 years of my life fighting Common Core, the best way I can describe ranked choice voting is this is counting votes the Common Core way. We took a very straightforward, simple process and we made it as convoluted and untransparent as possible. And we removed in the process the concept of one person, one vote. So again, you'll have to forgive my little math brain here. Go back to 8th grade math and remember order of operations. Do you add first? Do you multiply first? Okay. The reason why that's important is because if you add these same numbers, same operations, 2 plus 3 times 6, right? If I add first, I get a different answer than if I multiply first. So I want you to keep that in your head as we talk about ranked choice voting, because the order matters. And that is especially important when it comes to centralizing power. Right now, when you vote in your counties for a statewide office, right? So your county clerk is responsible for the elections in your county. And this is a brilliant thing because it decentralizes power. And again, back to 8th grade civics, separation of powers. That's one of those major points that we were founded on, because we don't trust power being concentrated into the hands of one small group of people. So you go and you vote, and once upon a time you used to go vote like at the high school, and the people there would like physically take your ballots and they would like count them at the high school, and then they'd call it into your county clerk, and the county clerk would add them all up. But remember that order of operations thing? Because of ranked choice voting and order mattering, if you have an election that goes over counties, the counties cannot just call up the lieutenant governor's office and say, oh, Burgess Owens got this amount, Ben McAdams got this amount, and we add that to Utah County and we see who won. No, you can't do that. So where we used to count in the counties, for any election that goes over county boundaries, all of those ballots will have to be centrally tallied at the state level, okay? And if you were able to pass ranked choice voting on a national level and get rid of the Electoral College, all of our presidential ballots would be centrally tallied in one location federally. Does anyone else feel like that would give us a sense of separation of powers and confidence in our elections? No. So that's a problem. Maine has recently adopted ranked choice voting throughout the entire state, and this was a lovely little animation that they created for their people to learn about ranked choice voting. And they said if nobody has a majority on election night, this is what will happen. So again, decentralization of powers, and how comfortable are you that things aren't being corrupted?
All of the ballots and tabulator memory devices will be transported by courier to a secure location in Augusta for counting.
Everyone feeling really confident now? Okay. So this is one of my all-time favorite quotes from one of my all-time favorite people that is quotable, Thomas Jefferson. He says, "What has destroyed liberty and the rights of man in every government which has ever existed under the sun? The generalizing and concentrating all cares and powers into one body. If you want to destroy liberty, the fastest way to do that is concentrate power." And that's what ranked choice voting does. Okay. So how many of you here have read Animal Farm? There's a phrase, some animals are more equal than others. Ranked choice voting, some voters are more equal than others. So in 2019, Payson and Vineyard in my home county of Utah County were the two cities that decided to pilot the ranked choice voting program. And if you talk to them, everybody loves it. It's wonderful. But what's interesting, this is something that nobody figured out. If you look at that little yellow swatch over there, there were 2,771 ballots cast in the Payson elections for city council. They had 3 seats that were open. And what's interesting is with ranked choice voting, the way they process this is if your first choice is never eliminated, you never get a second choice. But remember, we're voting for 3 council members. So here we have the first seat. Look at Linda Carter. The people who voted for Linda Carter first as their first choice, there were 691 of those people. And they were like, yay, I'm voting for Linda, and I'm going to vote for these other people on down the line. But if you look at all of the other rounds for that first seat, Linda Carter never has the people who voted for her redistributed. So they voted for Linda Carter for seat number 1 for Payson City Council. But she loses. Right? So this Mr. Welton, he wins. Okay, now the way they do this is they take Mr. Welton's first choice voters, there were 1,047 of those, and they redistribute them like we saw in the video. Their number 2 slot gets gets put on there. So you see Mr. Welton isn't in there for seat number 2. And now Linda Carter's votes have gone up 976 because she got 285 of Doug Welton's votes. She was their second choice. Okay. But again, for seat 2, Linda Carter voters, those 691 original voters, voted for her for seat number 2. They never voted for anyone else. But she loses again. Brian Hewlett wins. Then they redistribute his votes, and they vote for Linda Carter. Linda is finally elected, so everybody who voted for Linda is really excited because she got on the city council. But those people that voted for her didn't vote for anyone else. I mean, they filled out their ballots like everybody else. They had no idea when they went to the polls or mailed in their ballots that they were only going to vote for her. They thought they were going to vote for her and 2 other people, at least. But they didn't because of the way the algorithm works, the order in which people were eliminated. They voted for Linda 3 times. Okay? Now, the argument is that, like if you're voting for governor, well, you would still keep voting for that same person over and over and over again. The city council is different. I don't know about you, but for me, sometimes I vote for 2 or 3 people because I like the interaction. This person's really strong on roads, and this person's really strong on water, and this person's really strong on police and fire. And so, I'm voting for those 3 people. And if I go to vote, maybe I don't have a preference on which one of them is my top priority. But what if I ranked the one person first that then gave me no other votes? That's disenfranchisement. And it would be wrong, except that nobody in Payson really knows that happened, so they're all really happy. And you can say, well, but it was 691 people. There weren't that many people. Okay, but remember, we only had 2,700 people that voted anyway. That's 24.9% of voters. That's a quarter of your population that got to vote for one person instead of 3. That's wrong. What's interesting is Vineyard did the same thing. They had 2 city council seats open, and their percentage of voters that got to vote for 1 instead of 2 was 25.3%. About a quarter of their voters were disenfranchised. Okay? The other thing I forgot to say. The other thing that's lovely about this, there are 29 counties in the state of Utah. 28 out of 29 county clerks who are in charge of elections are opposed vehemently to ranked choice voting, in part because it cannot be audited. You are trusting a computer. So one of the elections directors told me, he said, this is how they recommend you verify and audit the vote for ranked choice voting. You purchase 2 different computer systems, and you feed the ballots into one, and you get the result. And then you feed the ballots into the other, and you get the result. And if they're the same, then you audited it. Okay? Yeah, again, we're trusting the computers. And I don't know what you do if they're different. Now, here's the other thing that he told me that is really fascinating. There are no machines that handle a multi-seat race like city council. So what they do is they feed the ballots into that first machine. They get the result. So like in Payson, they find out that Mr. Doug Welton, he won. Then they have to export the data into an Excel spreadsheet. The county clerk has to manually manipulate that, remove the voters and redistribute everything, and feed it back into the machine to come up with seat number 2. And then after that one's done, they pull that data out into that Excel spreadsheet, redistribute those votes manually, and feed it back in. Okay, your county clerk just has to be a fallible human being to make a mistake, all right? But you're messing with people's ballots. That's really messed up. Okay, so here's an example. One of the other things that we are told is that ranked choice voting is wonderful because you're going to get the consensus candidate. You're going to get the person that the most number of people really, really like. Okay? Sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. So here's an example. All of these examples are shortened because, there are actually 12 ways you could distribute ballots with 3 candidates. But we're going to go with 3 because I'm lazy and you guys don't want to be here all night. And I'm a math major and I could bore you to tears. Okay, so in this example, 35% of the voters ranked Mark first, John second, and Tom third. 34% ranked Tom first, then John, and then Mark, and 31% ranked John first, Mark second, and Tom third. And in that scenario, under ranked choice voting, Mark wins. Okay? That's great. But if you look, who's the consensus candidate? If you look at the comparison between John and Mark, 65% of the voters prefer John over Mark. Okay, so it's not always the consensus candidate. Okay, the problem is that when your first choice, the people that voted for Tom first, we never saw that they voted for John. So we don't know that they actually preferred John over Mark. Okay, now here's the other interesting thing. What if those people that were going to vote for Tom first, they really, really like Tom, but they're like, but I really don't want Mark to win, and I'm afraid that if I vote for Tom first, that then Mark's going to win, which is basically what we deal with in every election, right? This just makes you think that it's different, but it's not. 4% of them decide, I'm going to switch my first and second choice votes, and then in that case, John wins. Okay, so yeah, it's not really straightforward, and it's a little bit less than transparent. So here's another interesting example. We talked about in the original video about a false majority. The majority is determined based on the final round of counting. But as we've seen, if people don't rank all of the options, because maybe you don't like all of the people and you don't want to vote for them, or maybe there are 15 people on the ballot and you're like, seriously? I can't vet them. I don't know anything about them. I'm going to rank the first 3 or the first 5 or whatever. Then you get exhausted ballots potentially. So again, this is Maine. In 2018, they had a congressional race. And if we had a regular plurality, first past the post kind of thing, Bruce Poliquin, I believe he was the Republican, won with 46% of the vote. And so he would normally be the winner. Okay, but because they redistribute and you have second and third choices, you end up with Jared Golden winning with a supposed majority. But because 2.8% of the ballots were exhausted, meaning they didn't rank either Bruce or Jared, their votes were set aside and they don't count towards the majority in that final round of voting. And so Jared Golden wins, but it's really only 49% of the entire vote. Okay. Now, again, you could say, oh, well, then you just need to vote for everybody. But again, maybe you don't want to. And the argument is this doesn't happen very often. So the Alaska Policy Forum analyzed 96 different ranked choice voting elections. And they found that on average, 11% of the votes are exhausted ballots by the time you get to the end. Okay, and it is as if they never really voted at all. So again, 11%, that's, it's not like we're talking 0.5% or, 0.2% survivability or something like that. Anyway, so yeah, 11% of the people. The other thing is that you'll notice that this creates a false impression of the support of the candidate. So let's go back to our gubernatorial primary. Spencer Cox won with 37% of the vote. I personally believe that that's probably a fair representation of the support that Governor Cox has among primary Republican voters, 37%. He had that was enough to win, but I think everybody knows that about 2/3 of the Republican voters really weren't that big a fan. Okay, whether you agree with that or disagree with that, but it's transparent, right? I think that's fair. If we had done ranked choice voting and been able to cycle through second and third and fourth choice votes, you may have been able to get him up to 51% of the vote. But there's still only about 37% of the Republican primary voters that agreed with him.
When we did the Republican counties, I was a delegate.
Uh-huh.
And when we voted, we did ranked choice voting.
Yes.
So Cox got on the primary through ranked choice.
He did, because if you notice, Huntsman was the second one eliminated.
Yep.
Because most people didn't want to vote for Huntsman as their first choice because they believed, I can vote for, Greg Hughes or Thomas Wright or Jeff Birmingham as my first choice and I'll get it down to Huntsman. But you really had the pro-Cox and the anti-Cox movement, right? And in my opinion, they did that because it got rid of Huntsman. Not that I'm a big fan, either way, but if we'd done multi-round voting and people saw where that was headed, there would have been probably a lot more people that switched their votes to Huntsman because they realized that he would have had a greater chance of competing with Cox in the primary. So anyway, It's just, and again, remember, up to 18% of the time it'll switch the vote. So you can pick any race and say, oh, well, in this case it would have worked out better. We should have used ranked choice voting. But then I can show you another race where it wouldn't have worked out so well. So you have to look at the methodology and say, is this good? Is this fair? Or is it not? So here is an interesting race. This was in 2010 in San Francisco. They had 21 candidates on the ballot. And that light blue line is the number of ballots that were exhausted. So you see you got to about round 10, 12, 13. People are done. It's like, I am not ranking any more people on my ballot. So the winner received 4,300 votes, but there were 9,600 votes that were exhausted. So theoretically, this person won with a majority, but that majority was really only 24% of the total ballots cast. There were almost 54% of the ballots that were exhausted before that final round. So is it really a majority? Here's another fun thing. It disenfranchises minority voters. Fair Vote is an organization that supports ranked choice voting, and they were talking about the prevalence of ranking 3 candidates, and I would argue probably in more, they were talking about a specific race, was the lowest among African Americans, Hispanics, voters with less education, and those whose first language was not English. Well, duh. I'm sorry.
Hard enough for us, yeah.
It's like I showed that to you. Now try to imagine that this is your second language and you're trying to understand that. I speak a second language and that would have been a pain. And in 2018, back to that main congressional race, they did a survey and 26% of the voters said they stayed home and didn't vote because they were confused. They did not understand the process. So, yeah. In Oakland, California, they found that there were 5.7% of the ballots that were spoiled or incorrect. Maybe you ranked first, second, fifth, and you forgot where you were. Spoiled or incorrect ballots, 5.7%. However, when they looked at it you looked at the demographics of the areas where those ballots were spoiled or incorrect, 7.4% were spoiled or incorrect in the predominantly African American and Latino communities, compared to 1.6% that were spoiled in the predominantly white communities. So you're really disenfranchising the minority voters. Also, there are a handful of cities and states that implemented it and said, yeah, just kidding, and then they repealed it. Burlington, Vermont, they used it from 2006 to 2010. They used it only for 2 mayoral races, and then the people voted to repeal it by 52%. Ann Arbor, Michigan, this is one of our earliest adopters. They did it in 1974. They tried it once, and then they repealed it with 62% of the votes. North Carolina, they used it for judges, and the legislature said, yeah, we don't like this. They got rid of it. Aspen, Colorado, they had it for 1 year, and 65% of voters said, no, thank you. And Pierce County, Washington, 71% of their voters got rid of it. So, for those cities in Salt Lake County or in the rest of Utah that have adopted this, you don't have to stick with it until the legislature gets involved and says that's what we have to do. But that's where they're going with this.
Yes.
They are hoping that the cities will adopt this, and then so there are 23 cities in Utah that have decided to do ranked choice voting this year, and in the rest of the nation, with the exception of Maine and Alaska that are doing it statewide, there are only 26 other municipalities. So we are the epicenter. We are 50%. So they are pushing for Utah to do ranked choice voting, in part because pretty much everywhere else is liberal progressive, and Utah is the bastion of conservatism, supposedly. And so if they get Utah on board, then it looks like it's more bipartisan. So they're going to try and get 23 city councils and mayors and residents to go up to the legislature this next legislative session and say, this is the best thing since sliced bread. We need to pass ranked choice voting. Okay? So we need to get our city councils to go against it. One of the reasons that the city councils are adopting it is not because they think that it's good that more voters are equal than others. It's money. Because one of these supposed benefits is you can eliminate a primary election. You can have 15, 20 people on the ballot, and you can filter it down with ranked choice voting, and you can end up with 1 or 2 or 3 people at the end of the day on your city council, and then you save money. So like in my city of Highland, 2 years ago, it was $18,000 per election. So that's, I saw the city council, they're budgeting for elections this year. They have to pay for it. It's their city. And so they probably were thinking, inflation, $20,000, $23,000. It went up to $27,000 for one election. So you went from $36,000 for your 2 primary and general elections to almost $60,000. And if you're on the city council, that's not a happy place to be. So our Utah County Clerk came in to save the day and said, hey, if you guys adopt ranked choice voting, you save money on a primary and you'll cut your budget in half. And right after that, we had like 8 cities that said, okay, we're going to do that. That makes sense, right? It's money. And because they've been told like 4 different times that this is the most wonderful thing ever, why would you not do it? Here's the thing about primary elections. So I told you I was on the Alpine School Board. I won against a 2-term incumbent. I had no money. I had no name recognition. Do you want to know why? Primary election. Primary election gives a grassroots, unknown, unfunded candidate the time to interact with voters, to knock on doors, to gather donors who could then help them win in a general election. If you get rid of primary elections, you have to have an entire campaign mechanism created and ready to go on day one, because you've reduced the amount of time you have to campaign. If I start campaigning in March for an election in November, nobody is going to pay attention to me. But if I say, hey, in June you're going to be voting on school board in a primary election, people all of a sudden are starting to pay attention. Maybe not in March, but by April, May they will be. Okay? And then it also helps the candidate, because most people who are grassroots, we've never done debates. I mean, I wasn't on the debate team in high school. I don't know how to do a debate. I don't know what the issues are that are most important to the people out there. I mean, I know what my issues were. Mine was math. Fortunately, in my area, everybody else hated the math too, so that was an easy one. But it gives a grassroots candidate time to build a coalition, to get money and donations, and to knock doors. As an example, the year that I won school board, I had a fellow school board member who also won. She also beat a 2-term incumbent. She represented Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs, and at the time, Lehigh. She literally knocked 4,400 doors in her campaign. Okay? Do we want people knocking doors and talking one-on-one? Or do we want people who have money and name recognition and an entire campaign apparatus ready to go with direct mail pieces and billboards and signs on day one? Okay? Primary elections for nonpartisan races are worth the cost, and I promise you this, if you get rid of primaries, you will get rid of grassroots, everyday people running for school board and mayor and city council. Okay, here's the other thing. How many of you hate voting for the lesser of 2 evils? Yes, of course. How many people have ever run for public office who were not the lesser of 2 evils? 0. I guarantee you. I am the lesser of 2 evils. Every single person who has ever run for public office is a fallible, flawed human being. We are the lesser of 2 evils. Okay? So you have to take the time to look at all of the people running and say pros, cons, make that really difficult decision of, I am going to put my vote behind this person for these reasons. And I don't know, and I don't care what those reasons are for you, but I respect the fact that you're making that mental effort and making those decisions and casting one vote for one person. And then I can choose to do exactly the same. The fiction that I can vote for the lesser of two evils and then still have my second or third choice count really is not a vote of conscience. Because how many times do you make an act of conscience where there is no downside? If there is no downside, it is not an act of conscience. Okay? If I choose to forego the chocolate cake, it's an act of conscience because I really want the chocolate cake. But if I can have my chocolate cake and not gain weight, it's not an act of conscience, right? That's what this is. You can have your chocolate cake and we promise you, you will not gain weight. It's not true. We all know that. So here's the thing. They talk about third parties because this is where the idea is that you're going to get third parties and they're going to get support. Because you can remember, we could vote for Tom first. He's the third party. We really want to vote for Tom, but in the end we'll get John, except then you'll probably get Mark. Here's the thing. Third parties in general do not run for public office with the intent of being able to win. They run to influence the debate, to move whoever wins in a direction, to influence the populace in a direction through speech, through First Amendment. I'm standing on this hill and I want to bring people to understand why this is important. Okay? They do that by being there in that discussion. What it doesn't do under ranked choice voting is allow those third parties or the fringe candidates to influence that debate very well. Because the third party or fringe candidate is always ideologically aligned more with one of the mainstream party candidates than the other. So your Green Party candidates naturally align to the Democrats. Your constitutionalists are going to naturally align to the Republicans. So if I run as a constitutionalist and you run as a Republican, you're going to get all my second choice votes, right? So do you have to change and maybe think about what's more constitutional? Where can I appeal to those constitutional voters? No, you can completely ignore me, my constituencies, and my policy decisions. This is designed to funnel people into one of the two major party decisions. It doesn't help third parties.
Right.
The way that this was described again in Alaska Policy Forum, they said the third party's power is significantly eroded because the major party candidates can be confident of inheriting the votes of an ideological similar third party challenger who is eliminated in the early rounds of tabulation. So vote third party, get your second choice for free, but nobody has to care that the third party ever won or ever campaigned. So why not just vote for the major party candidate to begin with? But if you have to make a choice and you choose to vote for a third party, people are going to see that. They're going to see that you are willing to risk having this other person that you didn't want win because you wanted to stand on principle. Sometimes principle comes with consequences. So here's an interesting one. Who's paying for the movement? Anyone want to throw out some ideas? Who's paying for this? George Soros? Anyone else? Bill Gates, as far as I can tell, is not. It's like the only thing that's like horrible that he is not funding, but whatever. Anybody else? Yes, we are. So Fair Vote, they heart democracy and they're purple, which again, if you think about this, ranked choice voting is about watering everything down. Watering down the issues, watering down the differences between candidates. Not that there aren't differences, but you won't hear about them during the campaign. Right. Watering down the true transparency of the mandate by which someone was elected. Okay? They have two objectives. The first one is ranked choice voting. The second one is, interestingly enough, the national popular vote, aka getting rid of the Electoral College. Okay? So remember at the beginning when I talked about centralization of power? They actively are hoping that we get to that point where we get rid of the Electoral College. Oh, and by the way, we're also promoting ranked choice voting. How convenient if you wanted to steal an election, if you only had to go one place. That would be brilliant. So, who's paying for the movement? George Soros' Open Society, Bloomberg, Rockefeller, Joyce, Hewlett, National Popular Vote, Democracy Fund, you name it. And I mention this because who is not paying for the movement? Do you want to know who I'm getting paid by?
No one.
No one. So this is part of the problem, right? And this is why we need your help, because the people that are being paid by Fair Vote, there's an organization here in Utah called Ranked Choice Voting Utah. They were established in 2019. Before that, the guy that was that is working for Ranked Choice Voting Utah, he worked for another little organization called National Popular Vote Utah, but that now no longer exists. But he works for Ranked Choice Voting Utah. Many of you will know him. His name is Stan Lockhart. And he and his organization, they're going around to all of the city councils. One of the city councils said that they've been there 4 times. Excuse me. So they're going around, they're getting paid to do this. This is their full-time job, is to get city councils to adopt ranked choice voting. And so we are a day late and $1 short, and we're just going around trying to tell everybody about this and to not do ranked choice voting. Couple of other interesting tidbits. So you would think that if you ranked your first choice person, you know, if they got more first choice votes, that they would win. But remember that order of operations thing? So in this scenario, again, this is an abbreviated example. The people that voted for Ann first in this example, there were 39, and she wins with 39 first place votes. But let's say the Bob people, 10 of them decide they're going to vote for Ann first. And then Ann loses, but she started out with more first choice votes. That's an interesting conundrum, right? Then there's the nice versus honest. People will say, well, all politicians are corrupt and all politicians lie. The reality is that's not true. Remember what we heard about? Most of these people, especially city council, these are like average people, and they're like, hey, you know, I think I could do a good job because I really don't like zoning, or I really think we need this with our roads. Your average person, this is what we want. We want average people to run for office. We want them to just be normal moms and dads and citizens, okay? And it's true, I agree. Ranked choice voting is going to make campaigns more nice. Kind of like how it's nice when you go to Thanksgiving dinner with a bunch of people with different political opinions and you're all just trying to walk on pins and needles and not saying, well, we're all being nice. Okay, we're not going to hear the deep discussion and debate and differences of opinion because the people who promote ranked choice voting are telling people to form coalitions. You go out and you find who your second and third choice people are. You team up with them and you run as a group. Run as a group. And then you can tell them, oh, if you don't vote for me, vote for this person, right? But you don't want to come out and say, if you're running for school board, I think that the Alpine School District, being the largest district in the state with 87,000 students, should be split. You wouldn't want to say that because you might lose that second choice vote, okay? You might not want to come out back in 2014, which is when I ran for re-election, and say, you know what? That Common Core is horrible because you might lose that second choice vote. And even though I personally love the idea of having people be less vitriolic and nicer to their fellow candidates in a campaign, that's a function of personal integrity. That is not supposed to be a function of the voting system. And if it is, you have to ask yourself what we're missing out on. And I guarantee you, 10 years from now, if we adopt ranked choice voting, you're not going to have any discussion of issues, and you're going to get people in office, and then you're going to find out what they actually stand for. Ronald Reagan quote. This I completely agree with. We don't need necessarily a third party or people that are talking about, you know, just generalities, hope and change. What we need is people who run for office who are raising a banner of no pale pastels but bold colors which make it unmistakably clear where we stand on all of the issues troubling the people. And if the people who are running for office cannot tell you where they stand on the issues, how can you consent to your government? So, is ranked choice voting fair? It centralizes power. It is unfair in a multi-seat race like city council. It redefines the majority. It disenfranchises minorities and causes ballot confusion. It limits grassroots through the elimination of a primary and neuters third-party candidates. And it is promoted by global power brokers. And worst of all, it is not one person, one vote. It is unfair.